A 64-year-old CEO just had his $13 million pipeline deal frozen by a county clerk's stamp. And the name on the blocking deed belongs to a girl he laughed at in a parking lot 27 years ago. How does an 11-year-old with a spiral notebook end up owning the one piece of land a multi-million-dollar corporation cannot build without? Douglas Harlan's lawyer called at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, and the first word out of his mouth was not a greeting, it was a number. $13 million. Frozen. Because of a water rights deed filed in 1968 by a woman named Patricia Harlan, Douglas's own late wife, and now held, legally and without dispute, by a 27-year-old named Nora Vance. The lawyer said her name twice. Douglas said nothing. He had not thought about that deed in 27 years. He had not thought about it because the day he got rid of it, he was laughing too hard to care. Rewind to June 1999. The Callaway County tax auction was held in the parking lot of the old Prentice feed store on Route 9. There were folding tables set up near the loading dock. Someone had put out a coffee pot that nobody touched. 4 locals stood near the tailgate of a truck, not bidding, just watching. The county clerk sat at the end table with a stamp and a clipboard, and the patience of someone who had done this every summer for 22 years. Nora was 11 years old. She was there because her grandmother, Ida, had asked her to come. Ida had no money to bid and no real plan. She just had a habit of showing up to places where other people were throwing things away. Nora carried a green spiral notebook. She had carried it everywhere since 3rd grade. That day, she had written the date inside the front cover and nothing else. Douglas Harlan arrived at 9:40 in a truck that was too clean for a Tuesday morning. He was 44 and loud in the way that men are loud when they believe they have nothing to lose. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and he talked to the county clerk like they were old friends, which they were not. He had come to offload pieces of the Aldermore parcel, 340 acres of ridgeline he had just acquired, and was already reselling in chunks. Most of the pieces had sold privately. What was left were the parts he considered worthless. He held up a manila folder. Patricia's old creek paper, he said. 30 years in a filing cabinet and never once paid a dime. He said it to no one in particular. Then he said it louder. Water rights on a tributary that runs dry every August. Anybody want it? Anyone? A few of the locals near the truck smiled. One of them shook his head. Douglas looked around the parking lot. His eyes passed over Nora and Ida without stopping. He said, "Going once." Ida raised her hand. Not to bid. She just raised it. The way she did when she wanted to signal that she was present and paying attention. It was a habit Douglas mistook for an offer. He pointed at her. Sold. To the woman in the blue hat. The county clerk stamped the transfer form. Douglas signed the back of the deed without reading it. He handed it to Ida and said something about how she was welcome to the whole creek if she wanted, and a few of the men near the truck laughed, and Douglas laughed hardest. Ida folded the deed carefully and put it in her coat pocket. Nora watched Douglas walk back to his clean truck. She watched him pour a coffee from the pot nobody had touched. She watched him not look back once. She opened her green notebook. She wrote one line. She did not show it to her grandmother. She did not say a word on the drive home. That evening, Ida set the deed on the kitchen table next to the salt shaker and a glass of iced tea. She looked at it for a while. She said she wasn't sure it was worth anything. Nora picked it up and read it twice. She was 11 years old. Some of the words were hard. She looked up 2 of them in the dictionary her school had given her at the start of 5th grade. She read it a 3rd time. She put it down. Her grandmother had gone to bed by the time Nora got out the county road map her grandfather had kept in the drawer beneath the kitchen phone. She spread it on the table. She found Aldermore. She found Route 9. She found the creek. Then she found something else. She did not tell her grandmother. Not that night. She folded the map carefully along its original creases and put it beside the deed. She picked up the green notebook. She wrote one more sentence under the first one. Then she closed the notebook. The creek on that deed ran dry every August. But Nora had just seen where it started, and she had seen something on that county map. Something small, something old, something that nobody in that parking lot had looked for, that made everything Douglas Harlan had laughed at worth a great deal more than he knew. Before things get even more serious, hit subscribe right now, because what Nora finds next is the last thing Douglas Harlan ever saw coming. A date, a place, a single folded document on a library table. October 14th, 1999. Callaway County Public Library, 3rd floor. Nora was 11 years and 4 months old. She had ridden her bike 2.3 miles in the rain. Her notebook was dry because she had put it inside her jacket. She was not there to do homework. She asked the librarian for the county infrastructure records. The librarian pointed to a row of gray binders on the far wall and said nothing else, which was fine because Nora did not need help finding things. She needed quiet. She pulled the first binder down and opened it on the reading table. Dust came up. She did not move away from it. She just waited for it to settle, then turned to the first page. She came back the next Saturday, and the one after that. She came back 11 Saturdays in a row. On the 5th Saturday, she found the 1956 county infrastructure filing. It was tucked inside a supplementary annex binder that had been misfiled under a heading marked Road Corridor Studies, inactive. The checkout card inside the front cover showed one previous signature, a name she did not recognize. A date, March 1978. No one had opened it in 21 years. Nora spread it on the table. The document described a planned road expansion along the eastern ridge of Aldermore. Route 12C, budgeted in 1956, surveyed in 1957, canceled in 1961 when the county bond funds ran out. The cancellation was noted in a single paragraph on the last page, signed by the county commissioner, and stamped suspended, not dissolved. Not dissolved. Nora wrote those 2 words in her notebook and underlined them once. Then she went back to page 4 of the survey document. The surveyors had measured the creek's flow at full capacity in a wet year. They had documented it feeding the Aldermore tributary at 47 downstream acres. They had noted which parcels would be affected by the planned road. She wrote the parcel numbers down. She rode her bike to the county assessor's office the following Tuesday after school. The woman behind the counter was named Doris. She let Nora use the property lookup book without asking why an 11-year-old needed to cross-reference parcel numbers on a canceled road survey from 1956. Doris had seen stranger things. 2 of the 47 downstream acres were held, in 1999, by Harlan Land Holdings, LLC. Nora wrote that down. She did not tell anyone. At home, at the kitchen table, she drew a map. She used the back of a grocery receipt because there was no clean paper nearby. She drew the ridge. She drew Route 9. She drew the creek. She drew the tributary running underground, from the source down through the ridge to the 47 acres downstream. She drew 2 boxes at the bottom. She labeled one Douglas. She drew an arrow from the creek source to the boxes. The arrow passed directly through the parcel transferred to Ida at the June auction. The deed Ida had put in her coat pocket. The deed now sitting in the kitchen drawer. The deed for the water rights on a tributary Douglas Harlan had called worthless and signed away for a laugh. Ida came in from the garden and looked at the map. She stood at the table for a moment. "You sure?" she asked. Nora looked at the map. She looked at the notebook. She looked at the 2 underlined words. She said, "Yes." Ida poured herself a glass of water and did not ask again. Over the next 8 months, Nora watched the Aldermore parcel from the road. She did not trespass. She did not make calls. She rode past on her bike twice a month and wrote down what she saw. In March 2000, survey flags appeared along the eastern ridge. In July 2000, fresh tire tracks crossed the lower access road. In October 2000, the county online registry, which had just gone live that spring, showed 2 new LLC purchases adjacent to the Aldermore boundary. Both registered to corporate addresses in the same city. Both filed within 6 weeks of each other. She wrote the filing dates in her notebook. She wrote the LLC names. She drew lines connecting them to the parcel map. Then she turned to the water survey document she had photocopied at the library for 25 cents a page. She turned to page 4. She read the flow measurements again. She looked at her map. The aquifer feeding Douglas Harlan's downstream parcels recharged from one source, one creek, one tributary, one 12-foot water rights corridor, recorded in 1968 by a woman named Patricia, transferred for a laugh to an old woman in a blue hat, and now sitting in a kitchen drawer in a deed made out to Ida Vance. Without access to that source, the downstream acreage Douglas was quietly assembling would have no viable water intake. Without viable water intake, no pipeline project. Without a pipeline project, 340 acres of ridgeline worth nothing. Nora closed the notebook. She looked at the map on the table. The trap had not been set by anyone. It had been sitting there since 1968, waiting for someone patient enough to read the paperwork. She was 12 years old. She had time. A man in a gray suit knocked on the front door on a Thursday afternoon and said the number out loud before Nora had even opened the screen. $8,000, he said, for the water rights deed. Clean close, 2 weeks. He had a clipboard. He had a business card with a gold logo. He was young and sure of himself, the way people are when they have never once been told no by someone who meant it. Nora looked at him for a moment. She said, "Come back if the number changes." She closed the door. She was 23 that year. She had transferred the deed into her own name at the county clerk's office 5 years earlier, the week she turned 18. The clerk had stamped it without looking up. The transfer cost $47. She had paid $47 to become the sole legal holder of the one piece of land Douglas Harlan needed most. He did not know that yet. She kept the deed in a fireproof box beneath the bed she shared with Cal, her husband, who was quiet in the ways that matter, and had never once asked her to explain the green notebook sitting on the nightstand. He had read one page of it once, by accident. He had closed it and put it back exactly as he found it. He trusted her. Every spring, Nora paid the annual property tax on the water rights parcel. It came to $112 a year. She paid in person. She kept the receipt. She filed a formal use renewal with the county water registry every 5 years, exactly as the deed required. 2001, 2006, 2011. Each time, she arrived at the clerk's window with the paperwork already filled out. Each time, she received a stamped acknowledgement copy. Each time, she put the copy in the fireproof box. She mowed the 12-foot strip twice a year, April and September. She kept the corner markers clear. The land looked like nothing. That was the point. The second offer came 18 months after the first. A phone call. A county official, formal voice, reading from a prepared statement. An easement reassignment. $41,000. Described as a fair market settlement. Nora listened to the entire statement. She said, "I appreciate the call." She did not call back. The official sent a follow-up letter. Then a second letter. Then a letter from a county attorney. Nora filed all three in the green notebook. In order. Paper clipped together. Cal saw the letters on the table one evening. He said, "Getting bigger." She said, "Not yet." He nodded and poured her a coffee and said nothing else, because he had learned, early in their marriage, that Nora's silences were not empty. They were full of something she was keeping in the right shape until it was time. Their daughter Sarah was 12 that spring. One afternoon she rode with Nora to the strip. She stood at the edge of it while Nora walked the 12-foot width with a string line. Sarah asked why such a small piece of land needed to be so exact. Nora handed her the end of the string. She said, "Because exact is what holds." Sarah held the string and did not ask again, but she remembered it. She would remember it for a long time. 3 years later, a third knock came. This one was different. The man at the door wore a 3-piece suit. He drove a car that was newer than the front porch. He introduced himself as a senior counsel for Harlan Meridian LLC and asked if he could come in. Nora poured him a coffee at the kitchen table. He set a leather briefcase on the floor beside his chair and removed a single envelope. He said $340,000, final offer from our client. He placed the envelope on the table between them. The letter inside used the word generosity twice. Nora had counted the first time she read it, standing at the counter before he sat down. She had read it while he was still parking. She looked at the envelope. She said, "No, thank you." He said, "This is the final." She said, "I heard you the first time." He picked up the envelope. He picked up the briefcase. He finished the coffee, which she thought was interesting, and then he left. 6 weeks later, his firm sent a formal abandonment claim. 12 pages. Legal language. The argument that Nora had failed to make productive use of the water rights and that under state property law, the deed was subject to forfeiture. Nora read the 12 pages once. She went to the fireproof box. She pulled out 3 stamped acknowledgement copies. 2001, 2006, 2011, each one signed by the county clerk. Each one showing formal use renewal within the required window. Each one making the abandonment claim, Legally, entirely impossible. She put the copies back in the box. She did not respond to the letter. On the other side of the county, in the glass-walled conference room of a building Nora had never been inside, Douglas Harlan sat at the head of a table that cost more than her truck. He had 3 lawyers with him. He had a consultant with a spreadsheet. He had a pipeline permit that was currently stalled because the State Environmental Board had flagged a prior water rights conflict on the tributary source. The name on the deed was Nora Vance. One of the lawyers said it out loud, and Douglas said, "Who?" Another lawyer explained. Douglas's jaw moved, but no sound came out. He had been building toward this pipeline project for 9 years. The infrastructure was in place. The permits were almost through. The $13 million contract was signed, pending one resolution, one deed, one 12-foot corridor. One woman who had been saying no to his people for 4 years and showing no signs of stopping. He told his lawyer to handle it. The lawyer was already on the phone. On a Wednesday morning in early March, a number Nora did not recognize lit up on her phone screen. She was at the kitchen table. Cal was in the next room. The green notebook was open to a blank page. She looked at the number for a moment. She picked up the phone. She answered. Douglas Harlan's lawyer was still mid-sentence when Nora set the coffee cup down. She did not hang up. She just waited for him to finish. He said a number. $1.2 million. Lump sum. Full deed transfer. Clean close in 30 days. Nora said, "I'll call you back." She ended the call. She picked up her coffee. She drank the rest of it standing at the counter. Then she called Sarah. Sarah drove down that Saturday. She was a property attorney. Had been for 3 years. She parked in the driveway, walked in without knocking, sat at the kitchen table, and did not say hello before she opened her bag. She laid 3 documents on the table. The original 1968 deed, the county infrastructure annex filing from 1956. Nora had kept a photocopy since she was 11 years old, and a complete run of property tax records for the water rights parcel, going back 27 years, every one of them showing the parcel taxed and paid. Sarah read in silence. Cal poured 2 coffees and put them on the table and went back to the living room. After 20 minutes, Sarah looked up. She said, "They filed an abandonment claim." Nora said, "Last fall." Sarah said, "They have no case." Nora said, "I know." Sarah turned to the tax records. She ran her finger down the column of years. $112 annually. No gaps, no missed payments. 27 consecutive years of the county itself taxing the parcel and Nora paying on time. "You can't claim abandonment on land the county has been taxing every year," Sarah said. "The county would have to refund 27 years of tax receipts to make that argument work." She said it flatly, like a door closing. Nora nodded. She already knew. The hearing was held 3 weeks later, in a county room with a water-stained ceiling tile and plastic chairs. Douglas brought 2 lawyers and a land consultant. Nora brought Sarah, Cal, and the fireproof box. Douglas's lead counsel presented the abandonment argument. It was sharp, well-prepared, and rested entirely on the assumption that Nora had never formally renewed the deed's active status. Sarah stood up. She placed 3 documents on the table in front of the hearing officer. The 1968 deed. The 3 stamped renewal acknowledgments, 2001, 2006, 2011, and the 27-year tax record, printed in full, showing the county's own assessment of the parcel as active property in every year of the claim period. She said, quietly, "The county taxed this parcel every year. The deed holder paid every bill. There is no abandonment. There never was one." The hearing officer looked at the documents. He looked at Douglas's lawyers. He ruled in 4 minutes. Douglas's lead counsel reached for his phone before the officer had finished speaking. Douglas's team called back that afternoon. The lump sum offer had not changed. $1.2 million. Sarah called them back from the kitchen table. Cal had gone to get groceries. Nora sat across from her daughter, the notebook open in front of her, pen in hand. Sarah said, "She's not selling." The lawyer on the other end said, "What does she want?" Sarah looked at Nora. Nora wrote a number on a blank page and slid the notebook across the table. Sarah looked at it. She said into the phone, "A permanent tributary easement. Monthly payments. $18,000. Indexed to inflation. Transferable to her heirs in perpetuity. Silence on the other end. The lawyer said, "That's not a number we can..." Sarah said, "The hearing was 4 hours ago. Your abandonment claim failed. The deed is clean. The pipeline permit is blocked until this resolves. Your client has a $13 million contract that expires in 60 days. More silence. 18,000, Sarah said. Monthly. Every month. Forever. The lawyer said he would call back. He called back in 40 minutes. He accepted every term. Sarah called Nora with the news. Nora answered on the second ring. Sarah said, "They took it." Nora said, "Okay. Thank you." She hung up. She walked to the kitchen. Cal was at the counter, back from the groceries. He looked at her face and did not ask. He just turned around and put the kettle on. 3 days later, Nora signed the easement agreement at the county clerk's office. The clerk stamped it. The same window. The same stamp. The same unhurried motion she had seen the first time, when she was 18 years old and had paid $47 to transfer a deed into her own name. She walked out to her truck. She sat in the driver's seat. She opened the green notebook to the last written page, the page with the number she had slid across the table to Sarah. She turned past it to the next blank page. She wrote one line, "Filed, June 2026. She closed the notebook. Somewhere across town, Douglas Harlan read about the agreement in the local paper. He did not issue a statement. He did not call anyone. He just set the paper down on the table and looked at the window for a while. At the feed store on Route 9, still standing, still holding county auctions in the parking lot every June, 2 men who had been there in 1999 saw the same article. One of them said, she was 11 years old. The other one said nothing. There was nothing to say. $18,000 arrived in Nora's account on the first of the following month, and the month after that, and every month that followed, for as long as Harlan Meridian operated a pipeline in Callaway County, which would be a long time. Douglas Harlan built his pipeline. He just had to pay Nora for the water. Some men collect power. Nora collected paperwork. Would you have taken the $1.2 million, or held out for the monthly deal that pays forever? If you're the kind of person who would have held, you already know the answer. So did Nora.